Mike Schreiner is the leader of the Green Party of Ontario. Good afternoon, Mike.
Hey, Brian. Good afternoon. How are you doing?
I'm not so bad. Here, sitting in front of me is something called the Ontario Greens Roadmap to Net Zero. So before we go there, let's figure out, what does net zero actually mean in layman's terms so that we know what we're talking about?
Yeah, basically it just means that we're not putting any more climate pollution into the atmosphere, and that any that we do put in is sucked back out through carbon storage and sequestration.
Okay, so that means we're not making the planet any dirtier, but hopefully we're making it a little bit cleaner?
Hopefully we're making it a whole heck of a lot cleaner.
Okay, so now that we understand what that means, you have this roadmap to net zero. Let's cover a little bit. Something called a fair share carbon budget. What is that, and how much does it cost me?
It doesn't cost you anything to have a fair share carbon budget. Essentially what it's saying is that in the same way the government is held accountable every year presenting their fiscal budget, the government needs to be presenting a carbon budget that shows that we're on a pathway to reducing our climate pollution so we can hit net zero by 2045 and make sure that we leave our children a livable planet.
So you mentioned just the same way as governments are held accountable by their fiscal budgets. I will point out that fiscal budgets have not been able to hit much in the last few years either. Why would we have any confidence that any government can hit these targets?
Well, I mean, first of all, we have to get away from this notion of, we set a target in 2030 or 2040 or 2050, and then governments kind of forget about it and pollution keeps going up. By requiring governments to report annually on how we're reducing climate pollution, it makes it transparent, it gives us an opportunity to hold government accountable, and we do have an accountability mechanism in there that at least requires government to present their carbon budget every year by March 31st. Otherwise, the Premier and the Minister of the Environment would take a 10% pay cut if they don't at least report to the legislature annually.
There's a part of me, Mike, that says I shouldn't have to have ministers face a financial penalty to do the right thing, but maybe that's the world we live in now.
Well, you know what? This is actually an idea, and I'll actually give the current government, the Ford government, the idea. I took this from Minister Fedeli in his first budget, had this provision in the budget saying that, hey, as finance minister, if I or future finance ministers don't deliver a budget by March 31st every year, I take a 10% cut, and the Premier does as well. And so we think that reporting on climate pollution is just as important in today's world where we are facing a climate emergency, that the Minister of the Environment and the Premier should be held to the same level of accountability.
Your roadmap also suggests that we replace fossil fuel used in vehicles, cut that in half by 2030. That's only 9 years down the road.
Yeah, if you look at how fast electrification is happening in the transportation sector, that is absolutely doable. And if you also look at the price of oil and gas on an international level and what it's doing to people's wallets every time they fill up, an electric vehicle is looking pretty darn good right now. You can operate an electric vehicle pre these huge gas price increases at about 1/10 the cost. It's only less expensive now, and the auto manufacturers are bringing a large choice of these vehicles on the market right now.
Do we have the electrical capacity to handle that?
We do, and our plan proposes a pathway to significantly increasing our electricity capacity, which is going to be fantastic for our economy, because right now Ontarians ship over $20 billion outside of our province to purchase energy from other jurisdictions. If we can shift that to clean Ontario-made electricity, that's $20+ billion we keep in Ontario's economy, creating Ontario jobs and generating prosperity for communities across the province.
How do we produce that green energy then, Mike?
Well, we have lots of opportunities to quickly ramp up low-cost water power, wind, and solar. I mean, right now, utility-grade solar is costing less than about 5 cents a kilowatt hour to bring in, wind around 7 cents or less. These are the lowest-cost sources of new electricity generation. We have lots of capacity in Ontario to do this, and there's a number of global investors who want to put money in these kinds of projects because they know that's where the future is.
Would wind and solar ever be like a larger player on the energy grid?
Well, it'll be an increasing player. I mean, obviously, we want Ontario to have a diversified grid. So, right now, the biggest chunk of our power comes from nuclear power, and we're certainly not advocating shutting that down. But we're saying that as we ramp up electricity generation, let's go with the low-cost sources of power, which are water, wind, and solar. And also, let's roll out more storage options. And there's a variety of storage options, including water, but also electric batteries. And Ontario is well positioned to be a global leader in electric battery manufacturing, because we have the minerals here in Ontario, we have the skilled labor force, and we have the manufacturing facilities to be a leader in producing batteries for electricity storage as well as transportation.
Is there a problem in the battery disposal area?
No, absolutely no. There are companies already coming online that can actually mine batteries. So in the same way you think of, hey, let's mine minerals, let's take old batteries, let's mine the minerals out of them as we create a circular economy that eliminates waste, and then reuse those minerals in producing new and updated batteries.
I notice on the roadmap as well a pledge to work with Indigenous peoples to protect a quarter of Ontario by 2025 and 30% by 2030. What do we mean in that by protecting Ontario?
Yeah, so, Canada has signed on to an international agreement to achieve those targets for protected areas. And a lot of the land that needs protecting in Ontario is Indigenous territory. And so let's provide funding to Indigenous communities for Indigenous-led solutions to protecting land.
Also talking about energy efficiency upgrades and heat pumps and replacing fossil fuel in buildings. I lived this life before, Mike, back in the 70s. Really, in all honesty. There's an awful lot of talk about upgrading systems, upgrading programs that you'd get from various levels of government. And then they, of course, disappeared. You're saying bring them back.
Well, we're absolutely saying bringing them back, because the best way to help people lower their energy bills is to make their homes and offices and businesses more energy efficient, helping people save money by saving energy. It's also a huge job creator. There was an economic analysis done that says, if government would put $5 billion into building retrofits, that would leverage $80 billion in private sector capital investment, create over 800,000 jobs, lower Ontarians' electricity bills and home heating bills by $5 billion, and significantly reduce climate pollution, because buildings are our second largest source of pollution. So here again is with some seed money from government, we can leverage private capital investment, upgrade our buildings, which improves indoor air quality, which improves your health and comfort levels in the buildings, but also help you save money on your energy bills.
And I know that I've seen the ads on TV from the Progressive Conservative Party, which talk about building infrastructure and roads and things like that. We've been building roads and highways in this province as long as I've been alive, and we never seem to reach the end of it.
Yeah, you're absolutely right on that one. I mean, we've had 75 years of history showing that if you build more highways, it just unleashes more sprawl and gridlock. And so what our housing affordability strategy says is, hey, let's build within our existing urban boundaries. Let's have gentle and mid-rise density. Let's have more duplexes, triplexes, quadplexes in our communities, not only because it's more sustainable and affordable, but it also helps small businesses, and it helps create that vibrancy in our neighborhoods that I think so many of us crave during the pandemic. So let's build connected, livable, affordable communities that really support those local businesses.
There's a lot of people, though, Mike, and I don't know what the number is, but I know they're out there, a lot of people out there who don't want to live that way.
Well, you know what? Most people I talk to don't want to have to drive an hour, 2 hours to work just to find an affordable place to call home. They'd much rather have an affordable place they can call home, closer to where they work, because they'd rather spend that time with their family, with their friends, with their community, and they'd rather save money. I mean, the cost of commuting is just getting unsustainable for people. So let's build communities where people can live, work, play, worship, and shop.
The United Nations is holding its climate change conference in Glasgow, the COP26, the Conference of the Parties, number 26, starts on Sunday. Mike, I just don't know these days how much people are invested in green issues.
Well, you know what, Brian? We released this plan today because we'd like the Prime Minister to be able to go to COP and say, you know what, Canada is going to be a leader in the emerging green economy. $26 trillion worth of global investment, looking for places to create new businesses, generate new careers and better jobs for people. we want to attract that investment to Ontario, and we want people to know that we have a serious plan, a real plan for real action to crush climate pollution and to attract investment in the businesses that are going to help us do that, creating better jobs for people. To me, this is a winner for our economy. It's a winner for improving people's lives, and it's a winner for just improving quality of life in our communities.
Where do you think this, Mike, I know where you think it should rank on our list of issues as we go into a provincial election, but amongst the electorate, do you think there's a real hunger to hear a lot of this?
You know, Brian, what I'm hearing when I knock on doors is the number one issue most people have is housing affordability. And I will guarantee you in our housing affordability strategy that's been well received makes a direct connection between building more affordable housing and building more sustainable communities that help reduce climate pollution. Obviously, I hear a lot at the door about health care, and we're certainly proposing plans to stabilize and shore up our healthcare system. But I'm also hearing a lot of people at the door saying they're worried about their kids' future. They're worried about the increasing number of floods and storms. I mean, the fact that we had 6 First Nations communities that had to be evacuated from northern Ontario due to forest fires, which then led to poor air quality in communities across the province. People are starting to recognize the cost both to their health, but also the financial cost of the climate crisis, and that we need to take action now to save money on those costs and to also ensure that we're building an economy where the emerging markets are happening.
And people really, I think, Mike, have to understand that all of these things are tied together. Nothing is operating in a vacuum here.
Brian, that's exactly it, and that's why we're trying to break down the silos. And I know most people get that, but sometimes, you know, the way politicians talk is like, well, everything is separate. But you know what? We all know in our communities and our lives that things are interconnected. And so as an example, you know, the WHO, World Health Organization, says, you know, the number one threat to people's human health right now is the climate crisis. So every action we take to reduce climate pollution takes stress off of our healthcare system.
Mike, thanks for your time.
Hey, anytime, Brian.